Stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started?
Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well, now you got it.
Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. It's about observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. And I do welcome you this evening, this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are on this beautiful blue planet. I have with me tonight Ransom, Godwin. It seems that the deception is all-encompassing. Have you noticed we've been billed one thing and sold another good? It does seem that this will continue. Everywhere you look, promises being broken, social contract broken. Now what? You're going to sleep in the straw with the pigs in the back of the barn. I was reading, some articles this week, and, it's time for us to take some action here on the planet, because I look at this and they say, well, they're going to try to say that your houses aren't carbon compliant, so then they're going to become a stranded asset and you'll have to leave it and they'll bulldoze it. And I'm thinking, they're going to be able to do this globally within just a few years. It's kind of startling if they're able to. But we look at so far the infiltration of global governance into the systems of our world and our life. What happened? Just the simplicity of leave me alone. I want to go prosper and make this world a better place. And you remember what it was like back in 2015, 2010, 1999, for anybody old enough? Anybody remember 8-track cassette tapes? Well, maybe if not that old. But what happened to the world? Like, the contract has been broken. So as we look at the resets of sorts, this monetary system reset coming in, it needs to be accompanied by something larger. Always has been, always will be. Look after World War I, look after World War II, and now the reset's coming once again. So Ransom, appreciate you joining me tonight. There's been so much movement on the economic front, which I know you're delving into, and the way that so quickly our world has moved into this confiscation phase of everything, of suddenly unelected officials are able to tell us that our homes are no longer compliant, that we'll have to give them up as a stranded asset, and we won't even be able to pay for it because it won't be carbon compliant. I don't know about you, but you know what? Time to flip them the bird.
I agree. I just paid my taxes. So, I felt like I was, oh yeah, I forgot I didn't really own my land. I still had to pay rent anyway. No, I'm just joking. I'm sure everyone's irritated when they pay their property taxes. But yeah, speaking of resets, I don't know how anybody could deny that we're not like in a full swing reset. I mean, just looking across the board at everything financially, with the agitation of countries allegedly, unless it's one big scam. And I kind of feel like that because the more I delve into history, the more I realize that there's this plot going on in the background. and the force-fed history that they give everybody, kind of like the television version of it for our era, it's just a big fantasy fairy tale. I mean, like, for example, I just recently got to visit all through the Yucatan, and they have all of these ancient sites there. There's Mayan, there's Olmec. A little further north, they have some, that were both Aztec and Mayan, etc. But just going to the sites, the entire history there of the place is, in my opinion, is just a fabrication. It's just kind of a made-up story by a few people that decided they were in charge of telling the story. Just looking at, a couple of the sites, you can tell that there's some major things that just don't make sense. Like, for example, I went to a temple and I was listening to the guy talk about, well, and the literature at the monument. There's also literature, but it's talking about how the temple that I was at Tulum was of this, deity dropping from the sky, and he's supposed to be descending. And then, I'm sitting there on the coast and I'm looking out from this building and I'm realizing, there's this big old shelf of really shallow ocean, teeming with fish, teeming with life. It's an obvious little port for trading. It's great fishing, I'm sure. And the jungle is so hot, even in the wintertime, that just going up to the edge of the coast and getting some of that breeze in the shade, it's like an air conditioner. It's like the only way to cool off. But I'm looking at the guy that they're telling me descended from the sky in this fantastical way, and I'm realizing it's a guy diving. It's a guy diving, and he's on the coast, and I'm at the temple where they put the little thing up there. He's diving for food. He's got a little spear in his hand. It's ridiculous. And then the fact that the site is supposed to be made by a Mayan people, so you can see that the site is indeed a Mayan complex. It's like rough cut stone and limestone mortar, and it's really rough masonry. It's really impressive, but it's not like there's no flush. There's no, level. There's none of those kind of concepts incorporated in the building. And then I go over to the other site at Chichen Itza, and what you're staring at in the middle there, the giant pyramid, is obviously not built by the Maya. It's a fine cut stone super calendar, and it's been destroyed. It's been attacked, and there's patches all over it of this kind of rubble masonry style where you could tell. There is your evidence of one great reset. An empire fell, a technological empire fell at some point, and I'm going to say it's the Olmecs just because there's not another name kind of to give them. And then the Mayans just moved in. They either did it themselves by force or they moved in afterwards in a collapsed society and just took it over. But either way, there's just evidence of this great reset that already happened there. And you can imagine that if the forest has overgrown these cities, because everywhere you look around the place, there's temples that have yet to be dug up. They're just not doing it. There's no interest in it because it gives a lot of evidence of these massive empires falling due to circumstances on the earth and war and the same kind of stuff we're dealing with today. So when you imagine the amount of food that had to be produced for these cities at one time, you realize that they had probably a farming epidemic. So if any kind of quote unquote climate change happened, it would have knocked their empire just right over. And then it and you can see just right there, there's two civilizations living right now. And we keep getting this argument that, in the past, there couldn't have been this pre-Diluvian technological civilization because, we were in the Stone Age and blah, blah, blah. But I put to you that the exact same thing's happening right now. The same old stories are repeating themselves in this reset. And you can look around the world right now and find Stone Age cultures that are still living in the Stone Age. There's the Sand People. There's people in the Amazon. There's, numerous of these Stone Age civilizations living side by side with the super technological civilization as, like Dubai, for an example, or, Shanghai or something, one of these giant cities that have a super technological thing. So the evidence is there that we're about to do it. And they're kind of feeding it to us in this little narrative where we don't pay attention. And I kind of want to get into some woo-woo later about, I think I kind of saw through the whole plan, ironically, on this trip, about what the world elite are actually doing in the background. Meanwhile, when they give us this fantastic theater of war and theater of culture that they just shift and change. It's just the biggest distraction that there is. It's the biggest form of bread and circus. They turned it into a technological weapon against the people. I'll go ahead and let you have some thoughts on that, and I'll get woo-woo with you in a minute about the plan I think that they have, and it has to do with the Olympians, the Olympics and the Olympians, and how that got started, and what they're doing today. This is how it started, and here we are now.
Oh, don't tell me I have to run a 26-mile marathon. I didn't eat enough oatmeal this morning. Come on, dude. You're pushing the pedal to the metal. I'm not ready for that. It's like you're a morning person. I'm an afternoon person. Sheesh. Again, what does this world entail for us? And I'm coming around. I've been doing a lot of research with my new report. It's a subscription report that I'm working on. The southern hemisphere seems to be cooling. It's very noticeable after this research I've been doing, to the point where you just shake your head and say, uh-oh, there's a big problem. Okay. Nobody seems to be talking about this yet. It seems to, as if it's just going to be a marathon, literally, of letting your mind not get caught up in it. Because Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he says, hey, man, all the contagion, all the chaos, it's in your mind. Because if you think around, if you just sat in your house for a week, a lot of these things that are happening across the world aren't really in front of you, manifesting in the mind of what the possibilities could be. If we pull the curtains back, really, there's not a lot that these elitist globalists can do. These plans moving forward. What control do they have when it comes down to the local level? If enough people in the city say no, or a state say no, then it's done. So how much of this is being mind bent engineered? Of just, there's that much control, there's that much of everything, versus there's only 8,000 of them and 8 billion of us, and all we have to do is say no. But I do like your, synopsis of history not being exactly correct as it's been presented to us in the history books. And you have to think about these resets have been talked about since time immemorial, and we have geologic and celestial record and solar system record now of turnings, if you will, for a better term. Literally, the changes of our sun and visible effects on our planet. Because I'm sitting here, what was one thing that they told us about the sickness all during 2019, 20, 21, 22 now? If you get it, your brain won't function correctly. If you get it, your body won't function correctly. If you get it, you won't process reality the same, and things will just be weird. And you know what? That sounds the exact same thing. And if electromagnetic fields change and the hemispheres of your brain process information differently, that perhaps instead of telling you why you might feel amiss or something a bit different with your physiology, the changes are masked away by, oh, you got sick. Don't think about it. Because I'm sure the Mayans were celebrating these incoming energies along that they knew the chaos phase was with the incoming energies. I'll tell you a story. When I was younger, I traveled to a place called El Mirador. Now, this was in Guatemala, and it was north of Tikal, about 5 hours down this bumpy old crazy dirt washboard road. We took a bus up there, and I tell you what, I thought the fillings were going to fall out of my teeth about 15 minutes into the ride, and then we still had like 4 hours and 45 minutes to go. Well, we popped up into this little tiny grass airstrip surrounded by, bamboo enclosures and whatnot, called Carmelita. And we got this old guide. His name was Beto. Not the political guy, but a real guy. His name was Beto. And he walked us in there, and you had to walk way into El Mirador. It took like a good 2 days because we walked for the first day and I was so tired. You talk about the sweaty jungle and the rainforest and whatnot. Thick, wet, humid, and then we stopped and we slept one night and then we walked for another 5 or 6 hours. The next day we finally got there. This place was the celestial observatory for the Mayan kingdom. It's called El Mirador. And I hadn't ever been. The pyramid itself at the top, when we climbed up there, somebody put a couple yucca plants right at the entrance at the top. After you climbed up these stairs, you had to weave your way through these 2 very sharp, dangerous yucca plants. Howler monkeys down below. And when we got up above the canopy up there, the curvature of the earth bended off so you could see over the earth. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen. Even in an airplane, you don't have the same effect. It's like wherever you looked on this top of this pyramid, it looked like you could bend over the horizon on the planet. And it was bending over the rainforest. And as far as you could see in any direction, like no lights. And just you could see bending off over the horizon. It was the most incredible, spectacular thing. And that was for 1999, December 31st, as I spent the night with a few people out on those pyramids. And we camped right on the bottom there. We camped about halfway up that main pyramid there. And you could see other people had also made their way to different pyramids and different sites where they were shooting bottle rockets or like fireworks, rocket kind, off of different pyramids through the jungle in that same city. Because El Mirador was a city complex. Square miles. It was like 5 square miles of city. So inside there were plenty of pyramids. But they really weren't even excavated yet. There were no roads up there. I mean, you went to Airstrip and you had to walk 2 straight days in there. We walked like 12 hours straight with mules and everything with our guide. And I've heard it's been cleared out a little and you can drive up to sort of thing now. And back then, Tikal was like the last stop. That was things were still being excavated and prettied up at Tikal. And then from there, north of there, and there was all kind of just forget. Staying around there, I stayed in a few guest houses, I was backpacking and whatnot. But you could rent a bike and then just cruise around. Boom, you pop in somewhere and there's some pyramids just right there. I mean, they were everywhere, littering. Obviously, if you have 5 square miles or more in a city in the rainforest, completely covered. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands pyramids laying everywhere, all up in there. It was just so vast, this empire, that, the stories they told us of, some people cut down the forest and then built this. It was like saying, letting New York City be reclaimed for 800 or 1,000 years by the forest of the Northeast, and then try to make an excuse that, it was like a few hundred people that were advanced, that they built all these buildings and they sort of collapsed and the ruins are still here. I mean, it's sort of absurdity at that level. And having a chance to, Carlos Castaneda, and eating hands full of enlightenment all over the place down there. It was pretty interesting. But I do think that we're at a crossroads of like hidden history suddenly reemerging. I don't know what it is, but it seems if you follow the cycles of increasing vibratory energies and decreasing vibratory energies through cycles of the ages, we're back at one of these points again where the desperation to lock us in or keep us separated from the true abilities of our human mind to manifest through this matter realm here. We're at it. And there's just a very, 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 should I say it again? Very short window to hold back us as a species or try to change us as a species, not to be able to go through this same upward vibratory circle of life again, if you will. Because you have to think about the cycle of life of a human and the turnings of the human lifetime. You come into the prosperity, into the collapse phase, into the depression phase, and into the exuberance phase. Well, again, it's the same thing. You're born. You come into your teenage years, your middle age years, your late life, and then into your, what they say, silver years, and then you return to the Creator. Think of that on a short scale, just a human lifetime, 80, 90 years. But then also think of it as a longer time scale too, 12,500 years. You can go micro, macro on this thing in terms of how far we want to go with it. And some of these energies are not going to be stoppable. They're putting up all these 5G towers and trying to create an artificial grid of vibration on the planet's surface. But at some point, there's going to be a wave of energy that sweeps through, that actually rides through the mineral composition of the crust, that is going to be subsurface of that will create a vibratory field that will come out of the crust. So at this very, very small juncture, and I'm not sure exactly how many years it is, Ransom, but I would ask you to guess with me since you wanted to go to the woo-woo. Like this artificial grid of vibration that's locking people in and changing consciousness, if you will. Like, I just don't think this grid can last for longer than about, I don't know, max 10 years, because it's just feasibly impossible that these increasing energies and all the changes that we're seeing inbound, with cycles foretold for thousands of years now, that these little 5G towers are going to stop an awareness that sweeps through an entire solar system. It's literally going to ride in the crust of our planet. The metallic elements of our crust are going to start vibrating and glowing, moving faster, and that'll also have an upwelling effect. More volcanoes and earthquakes, but that's going to rise off the ground taller than a 5G tower. That's all I'm going to say, because I've had a couple of strange things happen to me in the last, say, 4 or 5 months that I've noticed. Every time I get into a heavily 5G dense area, I get scatterbrained, where it's like I'm outside of my body, where I'm walking off either to the right or the left of my physical body. My conscious body is outside the physical body. It's like a substrate that's separated of anywhere from 6 inches to a foot, and I can feel it. Once I leave those areas, it kind of smashes back in on itself again, but it's not an exact realignment again to perfection. It takes me a little bit to get back out, to go to nature and try to decompress a little bit and listen to some meditative music and all kind of different vibratory musics to get me back in and kind of bring myself back together again. And I truly mean that. And I'm trying to describe it, but I had a horrific experience over in Nashville that really, ended up getting sick after that. And it was all because of the vibration. And, every time I get into these heavy 5G areas like Knoxville downtown in Tennessee or Nashville, you get in the soup, really into the soup, and you can feel it. It's almost like you're walking on a ley line. But once you get outside that vibratory area, things start to subdue. And I remember that one time driving out of Nashville, I could feel it all over. It was just like icky energy. And when I say this, I mean like icky. Like it was really, truly trying to separate the spirit vessel from the physical vessel, the vibration, whatever soup was there. We drove about an hour and a half outside Nashville because we always take the back way. Through the nursery. There's a bunch of tree nurseries and greenhouses, and it's up a little plateau up there, and it's a huge amount of agriculture, real cool, like super country roads, beautiful farms. So we come back that way, and about an hour and a half out, boom, it turned off. And you could feel it turn off so cleanly. It's the same way. Whatever this interference pattern is that's on the planet now. So, Ransom, sorry on that last one, but I will ask you again, like, how long do you think this 5G network can actually interfere with changing energies coming through on the solar system level? Because it's a last-ditch effort to disrupt humanity as a whole moving through the next several thousand years, because we're up and away from here.
I guess it'll last as long as people are eating, because that's the only thing that will distract them from what's coming from it. Not even on the 5G, what it could be broadcasting that we don't know about. What we do know it's broadcasting is super fast internet of mindless content and fear-based news cycles. So it's the vibration, regardless of whatever the mechanical job that may or may not be on the side, which a lot of people believe that it's broadcasting more than just internet. But say it's just internet for argument's sake. And what's coming out of it is high-speed conformity, high-speed disinformation, high-speed irritation. I'm going to call it irritation because it's rare that any good news stories are coming out of any of the mainstream media outlets. And all of those outlets, pretty much you can boil down to the same source. And now we're talking in robotic kind of speech, the source of everything that we're getting on this planet that's coming out of the 5G network, the Wi-Fi, all of these other programs of instantaneous data transfer is no longer the same source that, we came from. So we're at what the industry is now calling a holy grail moment. And this is an article from the Washington Post that just fits right into what you were saying, and also what I'm about to woo-woo with here. So human versus robot, the battle reaches a turning point, what they're calling a holy grail moment, when it's cheap, efficient, and easy to have a robot in a small station that does the exact same job as any low-paid, low-trained, low-skilled worker can do in a factory position. It's not only cheaper for the energy output that it takes to make the machine operate, but its dexterity has reached the point that they no longer need human hands to complete most of these tasks that these robots are fulfilling. So there's industry just for chance. So let's get back to the real world of billions of people on the planet with all of these dreams and aspirations of using financial systems to get the holy grail, so to speak, of spirituality, because that's basically what the chase is that human beings have. And now it's been hijacked by a technological system of distraction and, I'm going to say fantasy. But anyway, here in the background of, the fantasy, household wealth dropped by 13.5 trillion from January to September. Second worst destruction on record. There's part of your big reset. It's going to get really cold this winter in Europe. And you know what? A lot of people are probably going to get sick from this, that, or the other thing. And they're going to have a hard time finding antibiotics, as predicted. Also on the show, we talked about how the pharma is going to be hard to get. And then you look right here, turmoil in the world from, political standpoint all the way to financial. Brazil, the world's biggest beef exporter, is turning away from meat. You can go on these dystopic nightmare headlines that are coming out of the mainstream media, but not just the media. It's all coming from the same source. So the governmental, the medical, the media outlets are all pumping out the same message from the same source. Head of German state restricts hot water and the shower time to 2 minutes amid energy crisis, even though, they've been trying to claim that it's not really an energy crisis, but yet when we say it's an energy crisis, you're supposed to be afraid. But if you claim there's an energy crisis, you're just, fear-mongering. Dutch government attempts to forcibly close 3,000 farms to comply with green agenda. That's the second country that's now doing that. And then in the backdrop of all of this, we get another, I'm sure you've seen it, an Event 201-like fake, scenario of another catastrophic contagion that goes worldwide. This is from the people that brought you the Event 201 that, eerily predicted the very next 2 years of things that would happen as far as what they were talking about, which we all know is the new reality. So catastrophic contagion, and they're really pushing that idea. So this is basically the same thing as the Event 201. It's by the same people. It's a Bill Gates funded think tank that fakes the thing with fake news and, the whole thing, where they rub it in your face that, yes, they can make it. Now, let's get to the woo-woo part. I remember talking to you before, and I was trying to, kind of harping on this idea that we're the last human being. And I keep saying that because the evidence is overwhelming that this is the last population of human beings from the standpoint of the population reduction plateau that was necessarily going to happen, regardless of any other inputs that might have happened in the last couple of years. Womb with a view, Ecto-Life baby farm eliminates pregnancy and labor. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. We're technologically at the point now of the ancient stories of the gods being able to manipulate life itself. We need no father, no mother. They can just combine DNA inside of something with a fake womb and grow it. And now they're announcing factories. Now, I want to take you back a little bit to World War II. At the same time, like now, they had a production going on. And the reason I say that is because when you really look into the movements of World War II, you'll realize that the same financial sources, we go back to that technological word, the source, the same source was pumping arms and money and agitation in both directions until the world was at war, the theater of war. But in the backdrop, what they did is they put up a fake boogeyman and a fake party with, like all kinds of weird, nonsensical interpretations of history, and they called it a certain group. They were socialist. I don't want to, say the key word, but everybody knows who I'm talking about. And they reigned to power really fast within a decade, even though their country was bankrupt and broke from the last theater of war. But in the backdrop of that, everybody talked about war. We hammered everybody with, who invaded who and why and et cetera, and write it down as little historical factoids like we have with our history as a whole. It's basically just a semblance of who won what battle, where, and when, and whose people were they from. But something was going on in the background, and it was completely scientific in nature. There was all kinds of medical experiments going on in the background. There was a massive search around the globe to find the roots and origins of all people on Earth. Also digging up artifacts of ancient world to find out bits and pieces of information from their world. And then they create this thing called the Olympics. And we all know that's a direct reference to the Mount Olympus, where the gods lived. So the people that fought in this game, or the ancient game, or even competed as far as demigods and gods, were from Olympus. They were Olympians. And we create this thing that basically takes a tiny, tiny portion of a population of a certain area on the planet and gets them together, and they compete. And it shows the example of the awesomeness of the different diversity of humans. But not only that, it showed every single superhuman kind of talent out there. And for example, like, a Kenyan can undoubtedly, inarguably run further at a long distance, the majority of their people, than anybody else on the planet. And you can go on and on with examples of how there's a small, teeny tiny portion of the bell curve in each population that can do superhuman things. Now, they invented all of these medical programs, and everybody, forgot conveniently what they were doing. And now we fast forward to our time, where there's the same program going on in the background, and they're getting little bits and pieces of every single human being on the planet at the same time as they're talking about a great reset and how they have to cull the population. So it's not too far to think that these programs are still in action, and what they're trying to do is literally find the Olympians so that they can find all of the genes that may cause them problems, not because they want to, make human beings better, but they want to find all of the single threats out there that may or may not mutate into another species. And they are terrified of this. And it's not only on a mental aspect, but a physical one. These things that, different human beings of different populations of the earth are just better at than other human beings. And there's no reason to, get weird with noticing that someone has a talent that someone else doesn't. But they know that. And now we're to the point where they're talking about completely programming the human being, not only from the outside, externally, through this 5G network and the internet and politics and media, et cetera, but internally with their DNA using, memory RNA programs is one way. Gene editing, just like the Chinese admitted, yes, we created some, embryos and we edited the DNA in it and we rearranged it. No biggie. Forget about it. Go back to sleep. And then you got to think about all these elite that think that they have the right to rule. And you remember it was just a few years ago that the guy got the first head transplant. Now, if you think about this, what's going on, there's several sci-fi counterparts that you could think that correlate exactly with what's going on. So they've shown us, just like the Event 201, cosmically, they have to tell you what they're doing to you. So they call it programming. From the television aspect to the media aspect, it's all programming. But not only that, they're also telling you to your face that the human being is now a completely hackable device, and that they want to control it from the inside down to the cellular and DNA level. And what this is telling you is that they have no need for humans anymore. We're at that point now. They have robotic assistants. We're finally at the technological point where they can turn off this program. They don't really need it. So I would say that in the next 20 to 30 years, just like they say themselves, they are going to exterminate massive populations with programs of hunger, war, and then, of course, on the side, you have them basically chemically sterilizing a big portion of every first world country, and then now threatening us with, nuclear war, which, if you think about it, they've already kind of, if you follow the science, like they like to say, if you follow the science, we know they can pop about 2,000 of these things over the course of the next 30 years, and there will be no real serious ecological impact to the Earth unless they bust out the big boys. And they even have some that don't even leave lasting radiation. So if they wanted to change the population in an instant, all you would have to do is tell everybody to go to the northern hemisphere, where it's going to probably get a lot colder because they've been lying and telling you it's going the opposite direction. And I showed an article there of how they've been hiding the sea ice growth since about 1979 because that was at the peak of its melt, and they just started it there. So, everything looked like it was going downhill from that point. And they've just been lying about it since then. So the Earth and the climate change that's going on is not going in the direction that they are saying it's going. It's actually probably going to go in the opposite direction, which makes a nightmare for the northern hemisphere, which is the same place at the end of the Hunger Dryas, the same almost event happened. You can say it was natural, or, there's some fanciful theories out there that it might not have been natural, but in a sense, the same thing's about to happen in the northern hemisphere. Massive hunger, disease. We may even have a bunch of stuff destroyed. But think about this. All the poor, impoverished military-age men have now moved to the northern hemisphere, setting just another factor in there for mass die-off and the scenario for ethnic wars. And I've been looking at the Ukraine situation, and it's almost obvious that China, Russia, and the United States and NATO have already decided that there will be a conflict there. How big it gets, we won't know until they're doing it, I guess.
Well, it'll be brought to you on the tube with all the newscasters telling you how to think, how to behave, what to feel, what emotions you should feel. It won't be organic if anything happens. For example, food production. Now, if anybody knows about the shut off of natural gas and electricity in Europe, this tails right into what Ransom's talking about. The point of Europe having a functional economy or even an industrial economy anymore is finished, unless, I don't know how functional the economy is if it only runs at, warm weather periods like spring and fall when it's not too hot or not too cold. It's a Goldilocks economy. Because it's too hot in the summer, they need more electric to run the AC. If it's too cold in the winter, they need all that electric to keep people warm again. So you can't have a fully functioning economy that's only working 6 months of the year. So this brings us into a massive problem anyway, because global fertilizer shortages were, set to amplify. They were down, a good 30% last year. And you saw the fertilizer prices doubling and tripling. You've seen your food continually going up in price. There's nobody out here listening tonight that can't say, you notice your things cost way, way more than they did. Like you go into the store and you're spending way more on food than you did previously and remembered last time that you remembered prices. But here's the thing. At some point, you have to have some rationale and common sense moving forward. So, Zero Hedge had an article up here. The EU agrees to the 9th Russia sanction package after fierce division on food and fertilizer. So what might you ask this conundrum they find themselves in? Well, the self-inflicted wounds of turning off your natural gas supply, meaning your actual base commodity to manufacture fertilizers, that's one thing. You cut off the base commodity to be able to produce power and have an economy or even have an industrial society. That's another thing. Now, think about all the people from Africa that are stranded up in Europe now. They're not going back. That was a one-way ticket. Ain't no NGOs taking them back the other way. I'm sorry, that didn't work. And it's going to be unbelievably cold from this point. It's like they lured everybody up there and then they pulled the heat out. But here's the craziest thing. At this point where they're closing farms in Netherlands, and now they want to and are going to, in plan, reduce 40% of Germany's fertilizer coming in through this next planting season, 2023. There are already some massive problems with feeding the world anyway as it is. And here's the thing. These EU boneheads up there are angry that people would even consider to allow fertilizers to come out of Russia and Belarus and that whole block over there. Any types of Russian fertilizer products, they're like, we don't care if our people starve. We have to hurt Russia. And I'm sitting here going, okay, I understand banning the energy and the mining sector and the investments, and okay, I get it. But at the point when you're saying, we're going to cut off our own food supply because we're going to show them a lesson that our people are going to starve, it's no different than saying, oh, we're going to show them a lesson and our people are going to freeze to death in their homes this winter time. And if they complain, we'll just bring the army out onto the streets. But for only 3 countries to show some common sense on this vote and say, whoa, you know, we need these fertilizers to continue to grow food for the people. And they're like, we don't care. We really don't care, is basically what was said there. So they're like 24 nations going, we don't care if the people starve, as long as Russia gets hurt. And, you know, it comes into the complexity here of some nations and the leaders of nations haven't been bought and paid for and are not part of the WEF. They sit with normal society saying, wait, we need food, energy, clothing, shelter, stability, and security. And that's what makes a functioning society continue to stay functioning. But the rest of the bought and paid for Muppets that are out there, they're fulfilling the agenda as such. Because I was, reading an article here and that talks about yesterminutes, settled narratives, settled science, whatever, yesterminute, because it does seem that the ice increases can no longer be hidden, neither on Greenland, nor in the Arctic, nor in the Antarctic. And I'm looking at massive temperature drops across the southern hemisphere. So even if you look at the hottest data sets out there on the planet that run from Climate Reanalyzer to NASA to NOAA, they all showed massive and significant cooling across our planet since the beginning of this year. There's no way they can possibly hide it anymore that the global warming runaway is not happening. So look at the collapse in narrative of that. Something else needs to take the place of it. And your food production was supposed to cease or be halted anyway because of global warming. Okay, global warming didn't pan out, but now they want you to starve and absolutely, at what point are you allowed to, remove sitting members of a non-elected parliament that aren't upholding the social contract and allowing citizens to have food, shelter, and energy? At what point is the populace woken up enough to say, whoa, that you are absolutely against the people? You're in your own cadre over here, Hydra. You must leave. I mean, this whole unelected oligarchy thing that we're seeing, okay, it started in Europe, and even every website you see now when it says you have to abide by this or do you consent to cookies, blah, blah, blah. That was all started in the EU. Now they're coming out telling you what you can or cannot watch or what video platforms can or cannot host. Well, who's for the EU to decide what I can watch on Rumble or BitChute? What's for them to say that what I'm in America allowed to watch or not watch based on, they say, well, our citizens can't watch it, so you can't watch it either in America. Keep your stuff back in your own unelected nation. But it's gotten to the point where there's a few things that are kind of poking through, pretty visible right now, like optic orange on an ice sheet. This unelected oligarchy thing is definitely making its head. Like even the most brain dead individuals are understanding that, wait, not only is there an entire continent that's in your face with unelected officials, the full financial system of the planet with the central banking, many unelected, all appointed. Like when's the last time you and I voted for the Federal Reserve chair? Said no one ever, right? And if we look through the EU, all those top level positions are non-elected, they're appointed positions. So these unappointed, allegiance to nobody but themselves and their cadres, are now telling the citizens you have to starve and live with no heat. But then we come into the whole world governance body with the WEF, fully unelected, who puts themselves in the top positions to run around and tell what all world leaders needed to say and do in unison, and they all march lockstep. You can contest whether the persons in power in nations, premiers, presidents, prime ministers, whatever you like to term them as. Yes, they were elected, but how legal or how official or how honest were those elections? It's starting to rear its ugly head, like almost I would say in a majority of the world's population, it's on their radar now. Things can only get so bad before people will hold to the narrative or their parties or their political beliefs until they're like, this ain't working. We're starving. My kids are starving. We're going to look for another solution. And I don't know why they're pushing everybody into this corner when obviously it's spawning a huge awakening. I mean, more people are being awakened by the minute by all these collapses and everything that we see across the entire world happening in unison here than there ever would have been if they would have continued to move along with the same trajectory, narratives, the same, okay, you keep working your jobs, paying your taxes, buying your houses, getting your extra goodies, etc. What is it that's changed right now where all of this has changed in 2 years? See, something is here, but is it part of the plan? Because like I remember Die Hard, the movie Die Hard. It was a way old movie back in the early 90s. Bruce Willis movie. They got to the top of the tower, and I use this for an enormous amount of like explaining. When they broke into the safe, when they needed to get these bearer bonds, they needed the FBI. They needed somebody to cut the power to the building so they could override the security system to break into the safe. If the power hadn't cut off, they could not override the system. They needed the system. They needed to involve the FBI inside that bank heist at the top of a building because they knew the playbook. They knew they were going to cut the power, and that was the thing. They needed to get them involved so they would cut the power so then their plan could continue on the other side. Again, it's almost like that. It's almost like they're involving humanity for something because it needs to happen for the next steps to be taken. Now, I understand you have to tell the plan. Society must agree or kowtow to it or not resist. Hey, we told you what we were going to do. You didn't stop us. We're free karmically now. You're bad, not ours. But that was the thing. They had to get them involved. So it's the same. Where do we sit today? Like, who's getting involved with what on purpose now? Because everything we're seeing now is on purpose, as purposeful as those guys in that building breaking out windows and making sure that the police got called, then the FBI got involved. Same exact thing. I could just say, like in Thailand, they always say same, but different. So anyway, Ransom, I'm curious, did you have any epiphanies down there? Like, were you seeing through dimensional time space, walking through some of these sites? Because it seemed like you had quite a little bit of awareness increases down there. And like in Mexico, what's going on? Are people seeing through the illusion as well? Or is it everybody just, like you say, so busy with overload on the news and the whole upsetting of society that they're too busy to notice anything?
I don't think that down there, they're in their own bubbles. They're different universes that are affected by, all the stuff we're paying attention to. But I don't think they're paying attention to it because I got to see both ends because we were guests of guests kind of thing. So, it's not normal. I get to go stay at a 5-star resort, but I got an opportunity to. And there was like an attitude kind of from the management towards the people that didn't spend all of their money on everything. Like, you could tell they didn't appreciate people that were not disposable income people. On the other hand, like, put it this way: so if you ordered room service or something, you'd end up paying like $100 for 4 people or something, and that's really expensive for down there. But you could go in the local village and eat like 2 servings and still get out of there for $13 for 4 people. Stuff like that. It's they have 2 different things going on where they can't buy things that we take for granted here. Like, you could go to Walmart and you can buy some clothes that are on sale or they're about to get rid of them, or you could go to some other outlets and do that. Down there, you can't really do that. Clothes are expensive. Shoes are expensive. A lot of the stuff, it's just that they do the same thing like they do in the States, where you go to one state and maybe the groceries are cheap there, but the rent's high. So it's like a completely top-down coordinated system, and everybody's trying to get money down there on a scale that's unlike here. It's technological here. Down there, it's more with the people, but everywhere you go, there's, I'm going to go ahead and say criminals, not to sound bad or anything, but there's criminals right next to legit business everywhere you go. So, like, using the pyramids, for example, you can buy a ticket to get in it, but you'll probably see like 30 or 40 different people trying to sell you tickets that don't actually get you in on the way in there. And you would think, like here, the National Park Service or whatever would have the cops come pick those people up and they wouldn't be out there. They would take no opportunity to let someone get in on their racket. But down there, it's a whole different trip. There's 2 different societies going on at once, like kind of like what I was talking about earlier. There's a first class, first world thing going on with people that have money and they're doing their thing. And then there's these resorts are like giant gated communities, basically, to keep people out. So no one gets in, and the security's just like a dystopic nightmare, just like anywhere. I didn't really appreciate. They'll search your stuff going in and search your stuff going out. And it's just like a futuristic movie, but it's already taking place in other countries where there's basically a wall and the poor people are on one side and the rich people are on the other. The poor people can come in to work, but that's all. And that's the society that we're trying to make everywhere. But as far as awakening, as far as the pyramids go, we went to a couple sites. We got to look at stuff, and there's just a story. It's just like a made up story, just like in Egypt. They put together a story. There's really not much backing, in my opinion, scientifically. And they just put together a story, and now it's just a tourist attraction, and they're losing the benefit of the lost knowledge there. Like, while I was there, I realized that this, the castle or the main pyramid there at Chichen Itza is not only a clock with all kinds of different ways that's been destroyed and replaced by probably the Maya, because judging by the masonry, it's completely different than the original pyramid that's there, but they're discounting that there's a giant iron cross on the ground that takes 4 points of the year. Of course, on the equinox, the solstice, this shadow from the pyramid is also, they don't even incorporate that or put that in any of the knowledge. And there was a weird thing going on then too, kind of like this Olympian idea that I was talking about. So evidently, the Olmec built that, but at some time the Mayan took over and they built structures all around it, a big merchant place where they had business. But the main thing that they took over that was kind of bizarre was their altars. At the very top of the pyramid, at one of the pyramids there, is an obvious Olmec sacrificial stone. I forgot the name of it, but basically they used to put like incense and offerings and light it on fire at the heart on it and give that to the gods. Well, the Mayans took it to another level. What they would do is stretch a guy up over it, and they would cut him all over his body, trying to make him die the slowest possible to get the most fear reaction out of the crowd. So they took it from a scientific kind of culture and brought it over to a fear-based culture at some point there. And so the ball court, who knows how it originally got played, but the way that they made it, and even the guide was talking about this, is that they would pick out all the best, strongest, tallest men from the tribes around there, and even out of their own tribe, in fear that these people with bigger muzzles, taller things is a threat to power. So those are the people that got to play the great game. And, of course, the winners, they didn't have too good of a future either. But the whole site, you could tell that there was a reset and that they were using the same exact tactics they use today, kind of where you topple a civilization and then you reset it in a new image with the new format. And it's the same thing today. So they're trying this great reset. It's just like a computer with a new program. You have to shut it completely down and stop all other programs and turn it off before you can reboot and reset and have a new program running. So that's the stage that we're in right now, is the shutdown of the program that we've been in. And now they're about to reset it with a totally new program. And you can see what they're doing is not in the favor of, the natural living man.
Yeah, I'm wondering, you saw the masonry difference. Like, how many cultures? Okay, you got the Olmecs, the Mayans, Aztecs, not that far down, more Mexico. But I'm wondering, how many layers of cultural layers were there? If you're seeing visible differences in the way stoneworking was done and the masonry and the actual, concrete, for a better term of it, to plaster that all together, like, how many layers were you seeing in there? And that's what we're going to discuss when we come back after the break. David DuByne, Ransom, Godwin, right here with you. In the Ice Age Conversations, we'll be back after the break.
here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. Moving you through an ancient history hour here. Big thanks to Revolution Radio for letting us have this conversation censorship free, as we see BitChute having its bank accounts frozen. That's been an ongoing thing for the last 2 years, but HSBC actually contacted the bank that they had a new bank account at and said, you got to close their account because we were told on high that free speech is not allowed. So even BitChute, which was a response to the YouTube censorship, Rumble as well, they're going to, everywhere you look, they've had trouble with banking. Anytime you offer an alternative, somebody comes in. So this is one of the alternatives now. If you appreciate it, consider a donation for the running costs, production costs, tech costs. Right there, freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio, many ways to donate. Now, before we went on the break, we're talking about hidden history, perhaps. That's another thing. You start talking about Tartaria and things over on YouTube, and suddenly, you're getting restricted on your reach. So I like Petra because, as I was on the break here, I was flipping through my Telegram feed, and I swear to you, this is quirky because I clicked on this one called Bank Run Canada because they're always talking about gold and silver prices and that sort of thing. I wanted to zoom in on that tonight. Austrian Mint has the most and highest demand ever for gold coins, and Australia Bank and Australia Perth Mint also the same. A run on gold is occurring right now. But stacked in this was a quote-unquote allegedly ruled for 1,000 years. Now, they're talking about Petra here, and they're saying it's kind of fishy that I've been to Petra also. It's vast under there. You talk about square miles of a city. We're talking about square miles carved out of straight up rock. And they say 20,000 inhabitants live there. Well, I am here to tell you, 200,000 inhabitants, and there would still be room left over for another 400,000. The city is vast. There's Roman Colosseums. And you could see the erosion of plasma discharge and eons of weathering. Like you're talking hundreds of thousands of years of wind erosion through that area. But they're saying that Petra was around for 1,000 years, and the fishy, it collapsed at the same time that Rome collapsed. Now, what are the chances that a vast, prosperous empire that dug a full city out of rock, controlled trade routes for 1,000 years, just suddenly collapsed at the same time that Rome did? Like, there's a few missing chapters of history here. Wherever you look, there's the timelines just don't match up with the archaeology that is out across our planet. Yeah, I've been to the Treasury, and when you go into Petra, again, this is way back in the 90s. This is like 94, I think, was when I went to Petra, 94, 95. There was no armed guard. There were no guards. I mean, you could go climb in everywhere. I've seen some recent pictures of it, and it's like a monkey show there now. There's like 1,000 million billion vendors. You can't sit quietly. But I always remember wondering why at least my head height, this is even way back there, it looked like there were massive floods that went through there and just scoured, because they have these wadis where you can walk around. It's like, think about a canyon that's sculpted, but in some areas, because it's like sandstone-ish there. It's like Spider-Man. You can climb on anything. I mean, if you had a pair of boots, you could grip anything. It was like this really, like very rough limestone. So your rubber boots, you get crazy climbing. If you're into bouldering, that's your spot. I mean, literally, you get as close as Spider-Man as you can get, because anything you touched, you could hold on to on a wall. But some of these wadis that were washed out there, were only the width of my shoulders, or maybe 2 widths of my shoulders. And wandering through there, yeah, you could see where the flood levels were, because obviously that's where the flood waters go. But those areas where the Treasury were in the more cultural sites that you would consider tourist visiting areas were not in the flood zone. So even way back then, I'm like, wait, how did the floods get here? That must have been one massive flood if they flooded way up here where there's not even in. They're above where the floods are. And I'm like, why would you build such a thing where there would be floods? And then the Colosseum down in there too. And wherever you look, it looked like things were melted all over the place there, like melted rock. And that was another thing that stood out. That, Petra was before even Graham Hancock's book came out and all that, it was very surreal, unique. This doesn't make sense kind of place anyway. And then, Ransom talking about the Olmecs, and because I'm wondering with the cultural layers, before we went on break, we ran out of time there, but, thinking about, so I was asking, like, how many cultural layers did you see with the different stone masonry and, things that are used as, binders for the rocks? Because supposedly there was Tolmecs, Olmecs, Mayans, and, these stories of off of Cuba, a city at 6,000 feet depth of water, that would have been a crustal deformation event for sure, where there would have been a city above ground and then that would have sunk underwater. There was no like earthquake where it slid in the ocean. I mean, the whole crustal plate just sank. So I'm curious what you're really seeing over there, because you got to realize when I did all this same traveling up to Mirador, that Graham Hancock's book, Fingerprints of the God, was just barely out anyway. And it was the thing to read. And after I read it, I was shocked. I was like, yeah. All these things. Yeah, saw it over there, saw it over here. But it wasn't to the level of today where you can get on the net and really do a ton of research. It was on your radar, but it wasn't like researchable as such, because so much was controlled. There was only a few things on the net at that time about history. You got to realize the net was pretty new then. So Ransom, what kind of cultural layers are you seeing? More than 3 time periods squashed on top of each other or overbuilt on each other? Or was it 4? Was it 5? Or what'd you really see or notice now that you're noticing it and looking for it? That's the difference.
Well, it's kind of hard to say because we went to, I've been to 3 of the sites in Mexico now in total. So there's Tulum, Chichen Itza, and we were at Teotihuacan not too long ago. At Teotihuacan, they already know that something's bizarre with that. So that wasn't even, a lot of people thought forever, and you can offend a lot of people by saying the Aztec did not make Teotihuacan at all. They did know where it was at. They did go to it, and they did name it the modern name. However, there's 5 different constructions of pyramids under that. And not only that, we know that that's the oldest city in the Americas, like or we think it is anyway. So the Mayans weren't even starting building their first temple when Teotihuacan was already there. It was already, either being constructed or was well into being constructed into a city. So we know there's 5 different pyramids at the Temple of the Sun there. So that's 5 different constructions by who knows, because it started before any of these cultures that we've named and we know about. Like the Toltec is now the people that they say might have built that. The problem with that is the Toltec didn't come around for another 800 years. So they didn't build it. And then when you go to Chichen Itza, you see 2 distinct constructions there. You see the Mayan construction that is basically uniform stones about the same size, but they're really rough. They're not fine cut. There's no fine cutting in them. And you also see the main temple, which is fine cut stone, and it had an outer layer of fine cut stone that went together where you couldn't see mortar at all. It was just like together. And at the very top, if you look at the pyramid, you see these big squares that were busted out. Who knows what was on there? Some kind of figurine. It might have been a vault. It might have been gold. We don't know what it was. And they're acting like the Mayans built the place, and for whatever reason they just built it perfect, and then up at the top they just kind of patched stuff together where they put the God's face. Well, I don't buy that. I have pictures and video that show that there's 2 different, what looks like a patch job, and the patch job is the same kind of masonry that we know the Mayans use. So at Tulum is a completely Mayan city, and it's built with rough rocks that were broken. They're not cut. None of the buildings are level. None of them are flush. You know what I'm saying? So there's no high-tech type of mathematics. And then you have what's called the Olmec, which is just a made-up name for people we don't know about that may or may not have been elongated-headed. But it seems like whoever the Olmec were, or at least the first peoples in the time of the Olmec, built not only Teotihuacan, but this other pyramid at Chichen Itza as well. And this is one of the best examples of human, not only cosmology, but mathematics in the world. And that includes like India, Egypt, all of that stuff. It shows exactly, it's as close. Actually, I think the atomic clock doesn't precisely mark the year in exactly the same way as this temple does. And we already know for a fact that the Olmec people that we're calling the Olmec are the ones that created not only the writing style that the Mayan used, but the calendar, this calendar that represents the precession of the equinox, or at least a chunk of it. And in order to have this information, they would have had to have 52,000 years worth of at least oral history, mathematics. I'm thinking at some time there was several people around the world that may not have ever spoke. And the reason I say that is because all these megalithic cultures, and we can't really separate them because we don't know what the cultures were. The archaeologists put the latest culture that they want to talk about within the last 5,000 years on it every time. They do that over and over again. And these must be spots of power, because it's not just the people of the ancient world that continually go to the same spot and build over it, and then another culture comes and builds over it. But we've done that all the way to today, where the Catholic Church went to every single one of these and put a church up. In North America, like in the United States area, all of the giant mounds and pyramids of the Mississippi Valley, that most of them are now today's town squares or centers where a church has been built on top of it, so that no one can ever dig into the ancient knowledge. That seems to be the basis of why they do this. And not only that, they take the worship, the fake reality of whatever it is, who gets to tell you the directions around here, that gets taken by the latest culture by putting their shrine or whatever they're building and their logos on the spot. But as far as cultures building on top of themselves, obviously that main pyramid is one of the oldest things around there. And it's so precise that they had to have had significant culture, more than they're giving credit to the Olmec of having. This clock has to be big. I mean, they started at I think 3014 BC as the history of the Mayan people, which means that they're connecting themselves to some people that lived for quite a while before any of these buildings or monuments were being built. And then not only that, when you look at the basic Olmec calendar, they know what happened for the last 26,000 years. They've been following the Pleiades and Venus and all of these things for a really long time. The question is where did they get such a large amount of time when scientists is telling you that, no, we barely started really doing anything complicated. Okay, we'll admit 12,000 years because of Göbekli Tepe, but we're not going to admit nothing before that. And the idea is preposterous. Like I said, they're trying to say that because there were Stone Age cultures around the world, that there couldn't be a technological one at the time. And that's just nonsense. And I can prove it to you now, because there's, dozens of Stone Age cultures right now that, the UN doesn't even want us to make contact with them because we don't want to mess up their Stone Age culture. And they live beside us. And like I said, you can use examples of super high-tech cities in the same world, not that far away from the people that are living in the Stone Age. And I had a question for you. You were mentioning Petra. And as far as I know, there's a very unique cutting style at that place. And the only other place like it, I forget what country it's in. It might be Oman or Yemen. Maybe it's Qatar. I can't remember. But there's these big, giant boulders sitting out in the sand that have that same exact cutting style. And it kind of makes you wonder if somebody didn't just lift it from Petra and then drop it off in the desert out there, because it doesn't, they didn't cut that out of the local rock. It's just sitting on top of the sand. I forgot the name of that place. But
yeah, it's in the empty quarter, or not the empty quarter, but it's in the northwest of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I would like someone to explain how that same thing just appeared there. I don't buy that they just found that giant rock out there and they cut it. It had some kind of significance. It's almost like someone placed it there from a different spot. I'm not saying that happened, but it sure does kind of appear that way, that you would have the same style so far apart. But yeah, just one example is what you're saying, how many layers. The Teotihuacan, for sure, not only shows high technology there because they had the use of mica and mercury. So there's something at the bottom of the Sun Pyramid that no human, or at least human from the past ages, could technologically get in and see what it is. They'll die. They'll go crazy. So for whatever reason, they put a giant mercury pool there. You see the same thing in the Chinese pyramid that's now covered up with the forest and of the emperor. They have a bunch of it over there. So there was this worldwide culture that got reset. And the reason I say that, I think a lot of people joke about this awakening. Could humans get to a point where we could be telepathic? Well, the transhumanists are trying to hijack that and make it possible, but only through a technological version of it where they can spy on it, control, and program. Evidently, this already happened at one time on this, but it was a more of an organic thing. And the reason I say that is, how else could you build some of these things without a written language? How could like things like Pumapunku or Cusco, or the great stuff that's behind the Great Pyramid. I'm bad with names. I always forget the names of stuff. But right behind the pyramid, you got these gigantic, perfectly cut, giant megalithic work that's all over the Giza pyramid. It's buried in sand still. And just like Teotihuacan, it was covered. And just like Göbekli Tepe, it was covered. Pumapunku was covered. All of these places with megalithic high technology was completely covered in soil, either on purpose by people that were trying to hide it, or some kind of giant catastrophe that was felt everywhere in the world. And that's one kind of natural reset. But think about the reset of the knowledge there. Whoever built this had no written or no evidence of a written language. They didn't put writing on none of this stuff. How could you do that without plans? Without and then the idea that they had no they must have had a lot of modesty, because no one signed it. No one said, like, this people made this, how we do today. And even in the Mayan era and and you can go all around the world, these human cultures that show up, find this stuff, try to uncover the mystery of the last reset, they start writing on it and changing the story. We see that in Egypt, we see that everywhere, all the way to today, where modern day scientists are trying to retell a story of, the climatological, or if I could talk, the climate and the geology of the earth. They're trying to rewrite that story and tell you another story. And so that you feel like, you have to have this fear-based response to today's going on. It's like, they lie to you about the sea ice. They're lying to you about the temperatures. There is climate change. We know that. We know that it's been constant throughout history, and that these empires rise and they fall. And people like you and like Diamond from the Oppenheimer. I mean, there's all of these people now that are unlocking these cycles and putting kind of a context to it. And at the same time, they're doubling down on their fake effort to control the narrative that you are bad, you need to starve, we need to turn off your electricity. Matter of fact, you know what? You guys are peasants. You should just eat bugs. No more meat for you. No more children for you. I don't know how much more in your face that any regular citizen, but I know there's billions of them, could not understand that this is a reset on a global scale, where it's just like whatever happened. I'm going to say, a lot of people think that's crazy, but I'm going to say whatever civilization I think there was before the Younger Dryas incident happened on the Earth. That's like us today. We're a global civilization, and we're at the point again, like at the Tower of Babel, where we're all speaking the same language now. It's the digital language of zeros and ones, of computer language. And now they're trying to literally hook up the remnants of the population to that. And then if that doesn't work, we'll just birth them that way. And think about, if you have control of one of these factories, who's to say you don't make a batch that's fully military, or a batch that's part chimera of some kind of this or that, or a batch that just has integrated technology where they never have a thought of their own. And that's where we're going. Right now we're still not connected directly, but that's the singularity that we're all waiting for. And everybody on every end of it, whether you like Musk or the other guy, they all want to put a chip in your head.
No, thanks. You can have mine. I'll be generous today and give you mine. It's like giving that old ham and cheese sandwich you didn't want away for like a ho-ho or something at lunch. You can have mine. So Saudi Arabia, I want to, while you were talking, I've done a couple videos on this particular area here because they were getting enormous amounts of rain out in this. What was the frankincense root from the Narib Dam down in Yemen. So this area, when you said there was one of these doorways cut out, 131 of those same vast rocks with the doorways that are similar to Petra. It's the second largest after Petra. The Nabateans controlled this area. Now you got to look at some of this, stone carving that has gone on. This is massive, massive. And if you look at the base of it, even if you would consider that wind erosion, that's, 30, 40,000 years of wind erosion. But if it was water erosion, then you have to think, what kind of floods came whipping through that desert in what duration to carve that sandstone? Because when you look at the doorways in this, if anybody out there wants to go on the net and find it, it's Mada en Saleh, Madain, and then the second word is Saleh, Saleh. There's a whole bunch of like glamping and Airbnbs where you can actually stay at resorts just across from these, or even in the sand and surrounding desert, and you get these to yourselves in the evenings. There's 131 large of these, and I saw some, where there's strings of these, where it might be a rock outcropping where they'll carve 3 or 4 of these doorways, and one will be real giant, but then you'll have 3 or 4 smaller. But see, that area of Saudi Arabia before was forested. Now, not super mega forest of sequoia trees or anything, but my own experience in my back field, I was out there today clearing a little bit. We let one area go where we didn't really mow it because our mower broke down. The tree was all these new saplings that popped out were like about 1.5 to 2 feet tall after 1 year, gum trees. Well, you have to realize that for thousands of years, that area had been covered in vegetation. So if I got trees here that go through a winter dormancy period and they still reach 2 feet after a growth season of just not taking care of that part of the property, imagine what it's like in the desert where it's continuously growing and they had abundant rainfall. So what you're looking at is a massive transition of the desert landscape that ran across the Red Sea area of northwest in Saudi Arabia. That area was the frankincense root. If you go down to Yemen and Oman, frankincense is a tree, and the sap of that tree, or the resin is a better word to put it, is what was traded. They had massive, as far as I could see, frankincense plantations, for a better term of what we would know today, cultivated. But if you go circa 800 AD, they had the Narib Dam, N-A-R-I-B, the Narib Dam. And that filled square miles of water. It was the world's largest dam at the time. It was a brand new concept, damming up an area so vast that it was an inland sea. And if you look at the Gulf of Aden over there, and if you go to Aden Port, and then you just jump like 50 miles or so over that first little mountain range going inland, it looks like a circle. It looks like a dried out lake bed. Well, it used to be a lake right there. The entire area of umpteen square miles was covered in water. And this is what they used to irrigate. And see, that was only 800 years ago. 1200 to 800 years ago. Now, the stories we're taught is, those kind of forested areas or savanna type things with more than grasses. Let's say trees enough to support large amounts of wildlife, animals, people, populations, food growing in terms of like well beyond what dates would have been, but anything that you could think of. That, what do you think they call it? The land of milk and honey. It supported everything. From bees to fruits to animals and everything in between, the grains. We were told that was 6,000, 5,000 years ago, and then it started to dry out, and it was already getting dry by about 4,000 years ago, and then it was bone dry. Well, even the frankincense traders up the Red Sea, all the way up to Aqaba and further up into Petra. That was only some 800 years ago. So see, even there, if you know anything about those frankincense